So yes, our Zoom art chats continue for our exhibition of the five. We started with Stan Wiederspan speaking on Larry Zerbel last week. And this week we are very lucky to have the lovely Marcia Wegman joining us. Just as a brief intro, Marcia received her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in graphic design from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and her Master of Fine Arts degree in intaglio printmaking from the University of Iowa. Her artwork is displayed nationally and internationally, including in 2 embassies in Africa. In 2010, she was entered as a signature member of the oldest of the various pastel societies, the Pastel Society of America. And while she's worked in oil, watercolor, acrylic, handmade paper, and mixed media collage over a 35-year period, pastel is where she chooses to shine at the moment. In her earlier years as an art student, pastel was not considered an appropriate medium for serious artists. So there was a long delay in her trying pastel. But she turned to it after painting an English Lake District landscape with an old set of pastels and realized that they were the perfect medium for her. So we will get things started. Marcia, just start us off and tell us about when you started making art.
I can't even remember not making art. Paper dolls and such as a very young child. All through school, I was always the one asked to help with the frieze around the top of the classroom and posters, and then all the decorations for the junior senior prom. So all my life.
Mm-hmm. And when did you start working with landscapes?
That happened when I was commissioned to do an abstract painting for a couple. And I went to their home and met with the wife and thought we had everything agreed upon, measured fabric samples, just what they wanted. But when her husband came home, he said, "Oh, but I wanted trees and rocks and water." And to this day, we don't know where that came from. So I went back to their home and I brought an album that included the only pastel paintings I'd ever done, which were from the walk in the Lake District in England. And that's what they both loved. So instead of doing an abstract collage for them, I did what essentially was still the Lake District, but with better paper and better pastels. So the woman who had gotten the commission for me, when I showed her the painting, she said, "But do you ever do Iowa landscapes? I can't tell you how many people ask me for Iowa." And I said, "I love the Iowa landscape. Yes, I'll do pastel landscapes of Iowa." And that was 1999, and that's where it started, and it just took off from there.
Oh my goodness, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that it was kind of serendipitous like that. Do you have a favorite type of Iowa landscape to depict, or one that's most challenging?
Trees for me are the most challenging.
Mm.
And one of the paintings we'll talk about later, trees in the winter are especially challenging. But I can't say that I have a favorite. I love all seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I love taking on a challenge and trying something I haven't done before, something that pushes me out of my comfort zone. So no favorite.
Well, that's good. You certainly have a very wide range. And just tell us a little bit about your process from start to finish with a work. Where do you begin? How do you know when you're done?
I work from photographs that I've taken different times when I go out into the country and find the secondary road so I don't have to worry about cars coming up behind me. And I just drive slowly along. And when something catches my attention, I stop and get out and take photographs and then download them into my computer. And when I'm ready to do a new painting, if it's not a specific commission, I just look through those photographs and something will jump out at me. It might have been something I've looked at several times and just bypassed, but for different reasons, suddenly that looks intriguing. So I'll print it out. Sometimes the sky is just right for that particular landscape, but frequently I will pair the land with a different sky photo. And I've got hundreds of photographs of both land and sky. So it's fun to take a view I've done in the past and do it again, maybe with a different cropping, different composition, different sky, and it takes on a whole new feeling. So endless possibilities.
Oh, that's lovely. I like the niche.
So going from there, then the next step is determining the size.
Mhm.
Is it going to be vertical or horizontal? And when I make that determination, then I select the paper, and I work on a sanded pastel paper, which is made in Germany. And it was originally a company that made industrial sandpaper.
Hmm.
They were finding that artists were using it. I think someone else bought the company and converted it so that it's the same, I think, paper, converted it to a similar process, but using an archival process. So the paper is archival. And it comes in lots of different sizes, so I can choose. I have a huge roll of it that I can cut if I have an unusual size or a really big size. So then I take that onto a foam core board and lay it flat on my studio table. And I just rough in the landscape very, very quickly, just kind of getting an idea of the composition, putting in the basic colors, using a very hard pastel, because pastels vary greatly in their size, their shape, and how hard or soft they are. So you want to start with the harder ones. The softer ones tend to fill up the tooth of the paper very quickly. And you want to be able to layer colors over it. So very hard pastel, which I rub into the paper very thoroughly with my fingers, with my palm of my hand. And then I'm ready to start working over it. And I work very quickly. I usually don't work more than an hour at a time because I need to put it up on the wall and get away from it and then come back with fresh eyes to be sure I'm going in the right direction.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know about the hard versus soft pastels. Hmm. All right. Well, I'm going to pull up a couple of your works from the 5 exhibition. And I believe we're starting here with Dancing Lace, if I remember my titles correctly.
That's right. I've always loved doing Queen Anne's lace. And I had a photograph that just attracted me. I call this my COVID painting because I was being quarantined with the breakthrough COVID in this past July, and needed something that really took my attention. And although, like most people, I was very tired from it, there were times when I just wanted to have something to do. So began working on this painting, and it totally took my attention. I had so much fun doing it. And this is one incident where I used a different sky for the land. And when it was finished, I contacted you, Kate, you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Because you'd already we'd selected all the paintings that were for the show. And I said, oh, could we switch this for one of the other ones? I'd really like it to be in the show because I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And when I do something of this nature, as I said before, I get it roughed in and then I begin from top to bottom. So I start working on the sky and get that pretty well completed, and then start working down on the land. Sometimes go back to the sky to make some adjustments. But the most fun is at the end where I do the Queen Anne's lace and the grasses and the wildflowers. I love doing that. it's a real treat.
And it was so funny to me when you subbed this one in because this is what I think of as like a quintessential Marcia Wegman piece with the delicate details in the front and then kind of the mid and background being a bird's eye view landscape. And it was funny that I think this is the only one in the show that has that exact composition. So I was thrilled when you said that because I was like, oh man, yeah, we don't have one of these and we need one.
Good.
It all worked out. It all
It
worked out.
all, yeah, yes.
Mhm. And our second one of your works.
This is probably one of the most difficult ones I've done. Inspired by 2 days back in February, if you all remember, when we had very unusual circumstances where we had a fog overnight. I don't remember having winter fog, but the temperature was like 25 degrees. So it left this rime of frost on every blade of grass, every little twig and stick. And I just thought it was so magical that I got out with my camera. And this is an area, if anyone knows Iowa City, that is between the dog park that's on the peninsula and the bridge that goes over to Coralville. It would be right to the left. And it was difficult to get that sense of the delicacy of the frost on the leaves. I had to kind of experiment with that, but I was very pleased with the way it turned out.
And you said trees were maybe the most difficult for you, and I feel like winter trees, especially
Trees,
so.
yeah, because you really have to look carefully at the structure of the tree, the how it branches out, how it comes out of the earth, just all the details. Summer trees you can get by quite sloppily sometimes.
Mhm. There's more room for zhuzhing with summer trees, probably.
Yes.
Winter trees were just doing the skeleton.
Yes.
And my favorite thing about this one is the road, because I feel like you can see the shovel marks on the road, and they're very like rectilinear, which is
Yes.
so distinctive.
Yeah, I always look for those subtle details,
Hmm.
which are both fun to do and I think attract the eye, because my goal is to do a painting that from across the room intrigues the viewer enough to want to walk up closer to it. And once you get close to it, there's enough to keep you interested and looking around the painting and seeing the details and the handwork. I like to show the marks of the pastel in the foreground, especially in the clouds.
Hmm. This has one of my favorite skies too. I just love the colors in there. It is very magical. And I remember that hardened frost that we had that just kind of iced everything. It was really lovely. Was this sky the sky, or was this a sky subbed in from something else?
No, I think the sky was very bland, probably just a gray white. And I felt because it was so black and white that I needed some color in it and a little bit of warmth. So that's why I chose this sky.
Yeah, I love this one. And our third piece.
This is a farm that is west of the Amanas, close to Highway 30, and it was a commission that I did, or at least the photograph from that day was a commission I did for a couple, maybe 5 years ago, who own the farm, but don't farm it. They lease it out now, but it's been in the family for over 100 years. So they wanted a painting of it. And it was in November, which is kind of an odd time to do a commission painting, but that's what they wanted. And I was being driven along a gravel road because they wanted the photograph from further left of where this one was taken. But when I saw these beautiful furrows, I thought, oh, I want a picture here. So stopped the car and jumped out and took this picture, and then ultimately did a view of the farm from further to the west. But when I was looking at subjects to do for this show, I found this photograph again. I thought, oh, I've always loved that. I love those farms on the horizon, and I love the pattern of the furrows and the clouds. So that's why I decided to do it. And I was so delighted when the couple that owned the farm turned up at the opening reception, and I hadn't seen them for a few years. So that was really fun. And they're going to buy the painting. So that's a nice addition.
Mhm. I love this one. It's the title is something in November, isn't it? It's
November Farm, I think.
yes.
And I think it's so typical of Iowa.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not a month or a time that I think people think that Iowa would be particularly photogenic, like November.
Exactly. Yeah.
Overall, like not our most attractive month as a state.
Uh-huh.
So I love that, you found this really beautiful version of it. And yeah, you can see the furrows with the dead corn versus the turned over soil. It's just so interesting in a time that I don't think people think Iowa is particularly lovely.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm always looking for those moments, the when people commission a painting, they usually want it late summer, early fall, when and that is the most colorful season, late September and right now is very colorful, but I like to show it year round.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask, did you find commission pieces more difficult than working for, out of your own creativity, or do they inspire fun challenges sometimes?
They are always a challenge because inevitably they want something that isn't there. So I have to figure out how to work that into the landscape. For instance, I just recently finished a painting for a friend, and she wanted first she when she saw the dancing lace,
Mm.
she loved that painting, and she said, "Couldn't you put my house in the background?"
Oh
And
gosh.
she has a very unique house that is faced with stone that her son designed. And I thought, no, I'm not sure that will work. But she came over and we looked at some other paintings I had done, and she picked out one she really loved. And I managed to put her house in the background, and it looks like a country estate with
Ooh.
soybean fields in front of it and some detail of fall flowers. So it turned out very nicely, but it was a challenge to figure out how to fit that urban house into a country setting. So that's very typical. Sometimes people want figures put into it, which aren't
Oh.
there, or they want something else. But
Mm.
recently, one man I'd done a painting for us, I think it was a winter scene,
Mm.
and he wanted the same thing in the summer. Well, I didn't have a photograph of it in summer, so I had to just really tap into my imagination to think how it might look in the summer, just looking at the bare fields and the trees. So, yeah, but I love doing it. That gets me out of my comfort zone.
That's true. It'll present challenges that you wouldn't have done for yourself, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I will open this up to questions if anyone has anything they'd like to chat with Marcia about.
I have a question for you, Marcia. Speaking of the abstracts, people who know your work probably know that you don't do just pastels. You have this whole other body of work, which is, I can't remember if it's acrylic or oil, but they are abstracted landscapes. They don't have that same sense of precise detail that many of your pastels do. Can you talk a little bit about why you work in two completely different ways and the relationship between those two?
I work in acrylic, and it's on something called UPO paper, which is plastic, which I love working on. I started using it years ago for drawing, just for pencil, figure drawing. And one day I thought, I wonder if I can use paint on this, and it works beautifully. A lot of people use it for watercolor. I do some semi-abstract acrylic landscapes, but mostly I do totally abstract paintings, which I love doing. And it's a chore to put all the pastels away, and I have to bring all the painting and equipment up from the basement. I use a lot of different tools. But it's very refreshing because I'm just working from a totally different place. With the landscapes, I'm working from very specific view, very specific photographs, and I want it to look like that. But with the abstracts, I'm working from an inner place. I'm working from my imagination. I am working playfully, experimentally. It's like, let's see what'll happen if I do this. And I usually only do that for maybe 2 weeks, and then I'll put that away and maybe do pastels for 3 months. And so maybe just several times a year I do the acrylics, but I love them equally well as the pastels. And I use something that's a little unique as far as acrylic. It's called Venetian Plaster. And I buy it at Lowe's, in their paint department. I learned this from my daughter, who for many years did different faux finishes and a lot of decorative wall finishes, and used this plaster. It's an acrylic base, so it comes white, but you can add colors to it. And I love it because you can layer it and sand it, and then it reveals what's underneath it. So it becomes very magical to work with, and just very, very interesting. So it's a process I really enjoy.
Yeah, I wish I had one of your abstracts on our PowerPoint, but I did not add one.
Yeah, I didn't think of that either.
No, I didn't either. Other questions?
When you are, so when you're painting the abstract, sorry, a lot of questions today. Do you, what are you thinking about, if anything, or is your brain just kind of floating along and saying, oh, I'm going to put this color here or that squiggle there?
Yeah, I'm totally working with the color and the
Okay.
composition and the marks. I have all kinds of tools to make interesting marks. So my goal is to make something visually interesting that pulls you into it and keeps you engaged in wondering, and let people come to their own conclusion. I don't try to make it look like anything. But there have been times when I've done semi-abstract landscapes, and that's fun to do. I do them very quickly and gesturally, and it's just a different process, a much freer process than working with the detailed pastels.
Thank you.
Do you listen to music while you create?
Sometimes I do, but often I listen to recorded books. And I love reading, and I love books. And I have discovered that what I think happens is that voice, and the readers are always outstanding for the recorded books, kind of engages the left side of my brain and lets the right side be free to do the painting. So I don't do justice to the book, but there's something about having that voice going that I really enjoy, and seems to help the process.
Absolutely. Other questions?
Marcia, do you fix your pastels when you're finished?
No, because that actually darkens the color. It literally melts, dissolves the particles of pastel on the paper. I use it as a tool sometimes when I'm working on the foreground and I want to do very delicate flowers. I will put the darker greens, the background colors in, and then fix it. And then I can work over it and get very, very precise, fine details. I have a new experiment that I'm trying. I mentioned the commission with the house in the fields, and the friend that commissioned it, the one son designed the house, but another son built a gorgeous frame that she's had in her home. But she wanted the painting to fit that frame, which I did. But the frame was really made for a print or a photograph. So it doesn't have the depth to put glass and a mat like I ordinarily would frame one of my paintings. And she was willing. I said, I think it'll be okay without glass. She's going to hang it above the fireplace, as long as it isn't someplace where someone could actually accidentally brush against it, which would brush off the pastel. So we're going to give it a try. I'm taking it to the framer tomorrow. And it's the first time I've ever done a pastel and not framed it with glass, but some artists are doing that. So keeping fingers crossed.
Mike?
Hi, Marcia. First of all, congratulations. Beautiful work in the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I have a technical question. A number of pastel artists that I know use a watercolor base on their pastels, and then they put the pastel over the top of that. Do you do that at all, or is that something you're familiar with?
No, I've had a real problem. I've tried it a couple of times, but I found that the paper buckles. And they must stretch it differently than I do. So I find it just as easy to use the hard pastels and just rub them in. I do that very quickly. And it gets the same effect because you can layer over it, still have that color come through. Some pastel artists also work on colored paper.
Yes.
Which affects the finished effect, but paper I work on is very neutral in color.
How do you know when you've finished a piece?
I think it's just very intuitive. I'll be working away and I'm usually working on the details in the foreground, and suddenly I'll say, that's it, I'm not doing anymore. But then I'll put it on the wall and look at it to make sure that's it. And almost always it is. It's just something that says, okay, I'm finished. And I don't labor over it. I just say, okay, that's it.
You just know, like,
no, just know.
Other questions?
Well, I would like to just say what an honor it is to be hanging in the beautiful Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. It means so much to me, and I think it's just a beautiful show. Kate, you did a beautiful job putting it together. I know
I couldn't have wrong.
That must have been a challenge to decide how to put such diverse work together, but you did it
so
beautifully.
Fun. It's just such a fun, not even a problem. It's just such a fun thing to do, to see what speaks to each other and what looks good together, and then just the more logistical elements of what's going to fit on the wall together. But no, you guys provided amazing work. I mean, I couldn't have messed it up if I tried.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for being here this afternoon. This was such a lovely event, and I hope you will join us next Saturday as we continue our trip, or next Sunday, excuse me, as we continue our trip through the artists from the 5, all of whom are wonderful.